right, Jeremy Trinchere, not Chinchilla. Jeremy Trinchere's on the show today. Welcome, athlete builder. I'm your host, Jim Beebe, and my guy, Lucas Loring. We're back at it. And today, new sport, new guy, water polo, University of Illinois, and arguably one of the prettiest guys we've had on the show. So I saw that you can tell everything's all lined up, got the good lighting. He's down in Austin on assignment. Jeremy, engineer by day, and then steps in the phone booth, comes out as Superman, and by night he runs the J curve. What is that? It's a number of things.
Correct.
So the J curve, having been in the financial world, for me, what it meant was when you see the J starts off at one point and kind of slopes down. Now it could be a steep slope, a rounded slope, a slope that comes down and hits the bottom, then shoots back up just like a J. So a lot of times that's how a company is performing. They start off weak for a while, then they bottom out and they find some traction, and then they take off. Same thing with people, human performance, countries, economies, you name it. And then the play on words with Jeremy. So he runs the J curve, and the former athlete, now turned engineer. I know what the J curve is about. I was on one of your podcast episodes, but I'm gonna let you, Jeremy, tell us what the show is all about in and of itself. Then we're gonna get into some questions and see how we do things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to come on your show now, and yeah, I love the collaboration that we have here. And I have to correct you. I would love to be an engineer.
Oh
I'm not
wow,
an engineer. So the company I'm with is an engineering and construction
gotcha.
company currently, but
Bad due
not
dil-
numbers weren't my
ah,
thing.
bad due diligence on my part.
All good, all good. But yeah, so the J curve, it came to a friend of mine during like a branding marketing session. Obviously, it's a play on my name and play on the stock phenomenon, right, of the J curve. But it's funny you asked me about this because I'm actually in the process of creating a TED talk about the J curve, and I'm workshopping it right now. But I'm gonna start off with a kind of a cool metaphor. So if we look at
Mm,
the J, right, if we imagine the J, it starts off with a dip, then it kind of, like you said, bottoms out, then it starts to gain momentum, and then it explodes. So I like to think of the J curve as four stages. Okay. Now, the whole philosophy I had around it is, how do we take advantage of that rock bottom? We all experience rock bottoms at different points in our life, you could have many rock bottoms in different
for
points in your
sure.
life, right? With new levels come new devils, as they say. So how do I take advantage of that rock bottom for exponential growth? Okay. So still workshopping this, but the first stage is what I call the dip. Okay. Now, have either of you heard the metaphor about the buffalo versus the cow when a storm
Right. Yeah, the
comes?
Buffalo charges
Oh
into
yeah.
the storm, right?
Correct. So I call it the buffalo dip. All right. So we got to charge into
Sure.
the storm, whatever that looks like. So just for the listeners, in case they haven't heard, the buffalo, when a storm comes, they run at it, and thus it makes the storm shorter, right? The cow runs away
Mm,
from it, and it makes the storm
right.
longer. So imagine if we're going down a hill and we're resisting, like we're skiing, and we stick the sticks in. We're going to go down a lot slower. It's going to be a lot longer, right? We're not going to get up that hill. So I call the first stage the buffalo dip, right? And then the second stage is the pause. That's where reflection comes in. Okay. We kind of we sit with ourselves, we nurture ourselves, we pause and reflect. How often do we not pause and reflect? I mean, I'm guilty of that all the time. Like, I just kind of like get caught up in the routines of life. We're working hard. Maybe if I keep working hard in my business, all the other problems will go away. Not necessarily the case. Okay. Then stage three is when we start to build momentum. We got to do something, and it's basic inertia, right? An object in motion will stay in motion. It's basic physics. An object at rest will stay at rest. So as soon as we start that little small action, right? A good friend of mine says, he taught me this. It's when things don't add up, you need to subtract a whole lot. So during that pause phase,
Mm,
subtract, start doing something that's going to nourish yourself, gain some momentum, and then the final stage, explosion. And you're just off to the races at that point. So still working on that little TED talk there. That's a little paraphrased version of it, but that's the concept. right? Once we start building momentum, we'll be able to take off. And so many of the people that I've been blessed to have on my show, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they're experts, whether they are athletes, whether they are just an overall high performers in their field, everyone's experienced a J curve in their life. Otherwise, you wouldn't be you wouldn't be successful. The most successful people have probably had a lot of no's, had a lot of low points in their life. So I like to have people on and share their story.
That J curve is if you're really pushing, and that's happening daily sometimes. You know, with your
Yeah.
training, your relationships, that's happening all the time. I was listening to Alex Ramosi, and his favorite moments are when they're in that trough, when they're at that bottom. He gets a lot of joy and happiness because he goes, "Hey, I'm in the middle of it right now. The bigger the challenge means like the bigger the dragon in the story. And once you slay the dragon, he's like, well, imagine the story I'm going to have." So when he's in the middle of the worst shit, he'll say, "Man, I can't wait to have this story I'm going to tell here in 6 months or 6 years about where I used to be and what I did and what I'm going to be able to do going forward once it takes off." Because you get it in enough of those bottoms, you're not afraid anymore. You just realize, hey, I'm in a bottom. I gotta, work my way out. What's my process for that? Who do I need to help me? How does that happen? After a while, you're not really nervous. You just dig in and reflect, like you said, learn some things, and then take off. Doesn't usually feel fun, right? It doesn't feel fun when you're in that pain.
Mm,
But if you can recognize that, hey,
no.
I've been here, I've been in this before, I'll be okay. It makes it a lot more tolerable. And I'm absolutely 100% guilty daily that, hey, calm down. Don't go from 0 to 100. Like it's okay that this shit went wrong. Like Lucas was just saying, man, most things went wrong today, you know, and we're still going to end it. We're still going to end it on a good note. Like it's still a Monday night where I'm getting
Mm.
essentially free, not quite, but free continuing education. Right. So it's still going to end on a positive. So, uh, how's your show been coming along? I saw one of your notes here is that you had a chance to work with Dean Graziosi and Tony Robbins. Like those are Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle of heavy hitters in the industry on getting people better. So how's the show going along, and how did that whole relationship come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I left Chicago in 2020, I took a year off. I bought a conversion van and just effed off and just traveled for a year up and down the West Coast, lived on a couple farms, some vineyards, and it was probably the best year of my life
Mm.
so far. But every year has its beauty. Every year has its place, right? That was 3 4 years ago. But after that year, I got introduced to a friend of mine, Melissa Dugalecki. She's a business coach. She's actually blown up right now. You guys should check her out. But I started my passion was juicing, detoxing, health coaching. Like that was my thing. Like it changed my life. And I got a real cool story about that. We can get into that later. But I lost 40 pounds. My life changed. And I was like, this is what I want to teach people. And so I was like, okay, I need to start a business about this, and took a business coaching course or like a program with Melissa, and things weren't going that great. I had a few clients there. It was fine for what it was because I had a job, so it was more supplemental income to begin with. And then a friend of mine, Tara, she had a multi-million-dollar coaching business, and she was like, Jeremy, I think you need to learn how to sell. I think you need to just get back to the basics and learn how to sell high ticket. And she had some connections with Cole Gordon, who's like a leader in the remote closing space. And she set me up with Cole's team. I got an interview. I probably interviewed two or three companies before I ended up at Mastermind, but at that point, it was like a placement agency. Like they place you it was typically for coaching and consulting companies. If you're a high level coach who has a business program, you're going to have closers. And if you work with people like Cole, they'll help place closers at your company. And so I interviewed for a few companies, didn't get the job. And then a few months go by, I'm like, dang, like things are slow. I don't have regular income coming in. And then I got a message saying, hey, we got a position with Tony and Dean. Do you want this? I'm like, hell yes, I want that. I knew right away when that message came through. I'm like, I'm getting that job. Started out with them as a setter, so cold calling, cold DMing people. Quickly rose in the ranks to number one. Then I got offered a closing position, and then within a month, I was the number one closer in the company. And so, it was really cool to work with people like Tony and Dean. And when I'm talking to people every single day that genuinely want to change the world and genuinely believe that they can do so. So that's the type of conversation I want to be a part. So selling was super easy for me. I was talking to people like we're having a blast. People like me, maybe in their 40s, 50s, a handful of people in their 30s, and we're just jamming out talking about saving the world. So it was a natural like job for me to do. And so after about 7 months of doing that, 8 months of doing that, you can only talk about building a business and changing the world so much before you're going to want to do it yourself. So I left that company, started a sales consulting business, and then that went on to an AI lead generation marketing company. Probably that was last year. Supported about 50 clients doing that. So that's something I still do on the side, is help people build out sales process through online coaching consulting. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And it was an awesome experience working for those guys and just kind of seeing behind the curtain of what a celebrity coach looks like. And you're just surrounded by like-minded individuals all the time. The whole team was like, hey, how do we be better? How do we develop, as a person, behaviorally,
Mm-hmm.
business. So it was a perfect and logical progression for me to work with those guys.
So, Lucas and I do the same thing in that we work with kids, adults to get them better. We work with other coaches to improve them. And when I hear coach, I immediately think sports, and it's not always the case,
Right.
right? I have people that have coached me on better marketing, which I could still be a lot better at, or you can get relationship coaching, better with your spouse, kids, things like that. What similarities or um, where's the crossover when you have someone that's coaching at a college D1 level at Illinois, then you got Tony Robbins, who's even higher than a D1 level, you say a pro level coach. There's always going to be carryover or similarities for greatness. Winners, champions, whether they're winning on the sales cycle, they're growing their company by leaps and bounds, or they're winning titles. What similarities do you see from the top end coaches like that?
That's a great question. And I'm kind of passionate about this in the sense I didn't really like the
Mm-hmm.
term coach for people in the consulting space. I feel like there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. There are a lot of people that aren't actually good at what they do, to be honest. And so for myself, I never liked to call myself that. I was a coach in swimming and water polo. Now that
Right,
I coached. And as far as that industry goes, I mean, Tony's the best
right.
of all time. There's like no question about that. He's on a whole different stratosphere when it comes to coaching. So he can call himself a coach because he can coach with the best
Ever. Right.
ever, right? He's a master NLP practitioner. He could snap you out of a phase and pattern within seconds. So I never really liked the term coach as it applies to what you're talking about with online
Sure.
personalities. I always reference myself as an educator. I'm going to come on here and teach you what's worked for me. I'll educate you. If that works for you, then great, right? I always said my favorite job growing up was teaching swim lessons. That was my thing. Like I reflect on that, and that was the best time of my life. I just said that twice now. Best time. I had a good life. Had a good life so far. But my favorite job in my life, because when you teach something, you can relate to this because you deal with high school athletes and younger
Right.
and older, right? When I teach someone something that, and then they go out
Right.
and do it, is there any better
There's a
feeling than
couple that
that?
come to mind, but we won't get into.
The,
But yeah.
but like for me, it's like I'm teaching somebody how to swim. That skill could save their
Sure.
life someday, or save someone else's life someday, for that matter. So that I think about that all the time, and now I'm trying to equip people with knowledge and wisdom to save their life in other ways. So that's what I really love about what I do now with my show and my content that I have. But to your question, like as far as like a coach who's just starting out getting their, certifications versus a pro like Dean, like Tony, like these high level guys, I mean, a lot of it is just reps. How many hours have you been doing this for? How many hours have you been studying books? How many classes have you taken? How many, and then going out and doing it, right? Some people do it for free for a while. Then eventually they start getting paid. Then they get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions, like Tony. So I think a lot of it is just the reps. And one thing that Dean said to us in a meeting one time was he gets it often. He'll come off stage and people are like, Dean, you're such a natural. Like, Tony, you're such a natural. And they're like,
Uh,
no, I practice this speech for 100
right.
hours. Like, this is not, how many times you got to swing a bat to get the perfect swing? You're swinging a bat thousands of
Yeah.
times. And so kind of reminds me of a Bruce Lee quote. Who would you rather get hit by? The guy who practices, I think, the guy who practices 100 kick 1,000 times, or the guy who practices one kick 10,000 times? I don't want to get hit by that guy who practices that one kick 10,000 times.
It'll,
That's
it'll,
for sure.
it'll,
So a lot of it is
it'll be
repetition.
perfect by then
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things to take away from there, and yeah, it does come from reps. And you might read Gladwell's book Outliers, and he'll say, 10,000 hours is the baseline to become an expert, or 10 years, and it's 10's a good number, and it kind of makes sense. But there's a couple things. One, it does take a long time. Two, it's constant inputs. There's constantly learning different things and honing your craft. And then, like you said, there's how you evolve it. And so when it looks easy, that's the magic part, right? They say, "Oh man, you see how the guy made that catch? Do you see how the guy how he ran, how fluid that was?" Some people have a lot of natural gifts, but it's so easy and insulting to say, "Man, man, you're natural." No, no, man,
Right.
no, I'm not. No, and those guys weren't either. Like Tony talks about how he was washing his dishes in his bathtub, right? Like he was dirt poor. Like, and it takes that obsessiveness in anything that you really give a shit about if you want to be great.
Hmm.
There's no one that's great that's not obsessive. Now you don't have to be great. Like an A minus is really good. A minus is really good. B pluses are really good. C's get degrees, right? D's get right. So, but if you want to be outstanding and you want to be at the top, there's no one that's not obsessed and at the top in anything. I ask people all the
Yep.
time, completely different disciplines. They could be coaching, could be sports, could be running a business. They are absolutely obsessed. Now, when you are, there's other things that you're going to be out of balance about. Other relationships are not going to be going so hot because you only have so much time and so much energy and so much focus. So if you are obsessed, you're going to be great in that one area, but other areas are going to be weak. That's just the way it goes. What it is, so when you're running your show, it takes a while before you figure out what you want to do. And there's got to be a moment or time where you have to find yourself and or your voice. What was that experience like? Because at what point you'd say, I'm starting a podcast. Like you want to change the world, but there's your content, your podcast, but you got to be able to find your voice, like you said. How did that come about for you?
Hmm. Ooh, man, that's a good question. Yeah, it's something that I always wanted to do. Is I've been more and more open about this lately. Is that I've been a closet rapper since I was a
No,
young buck,
no, come
still
on.
young.
All right.
Yeah, yep, yep. So, and I've always had a stigma. Like I created a story, like, oh, just another white rapper. So I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody for probably 10 years. And with that, I knew that I was really good at talking. Knew I was really good at facilitating. I knew I was really good at connecting. And a natural thing for that as well as podcasting is interviewing, broadcasting. My mom worked for the Chicago Tribune for 30 years. So naturally, we listened to talk radio growing up. I'm like, I could do this. And I was in a relationship at that time where I felt suppressed, to be honest, where like I feel like I didn't have a voice in the household. And this is a story I created. It's not like she did this to me. You know what I mean? So I take total and utter responsibility about shutting my voice down. And when we broke up, it was like it was a form of like liberation. I was like, now I'm on my own. I could do whatever I want. And I've actually noticed this recently. It's like, don't wait for
Mm-hmm.
permission. If I can give anyone advice, don't wait for permission. If you feel something in your core, do it now. Like, we only get one chance. There's a great reel I've listened to like freaking 10 times today. Jeremy Piven's being interviewed on a basketball court, and I don't know what the interviewer said, but Jeremy Piven says, we only get one. We have a finite amount of time on this planet. You could be viciously mediocre, or you can wake up and get the fuck after
Right?
it. So, and I'm like, that's so good. Do you want to live a life of mediocrity, or do you want to do something here? So when we split up, I'm like, okay, this is a perfect opportunity. I left Chicago, bought that conversion van, like I said, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a show on the road? There's no excuses. I had a hotspot and a microphone, and that's it. So all these people out here that might be saying, make an excuse about starting a podcast or not doing music or anything like that. I'm like, bro, I was on a farm with a podcast and with a microphone and a hotspot, interviewing high level people from my van. So it was more something I can prove to myself. Like, I set out to do something and I did it against all odds. So I was doing something that would make myself and my inner child proud in that moment. So like, I found my voice. It's funny because I didn't like the actual sound of my voice for the longest time, and now I do actually like it. And it was a big moment for me going back to the voice around the breakup and suppression. I found my voice in that moment by ending that relationship, because you spend 10 years with somebody, you're getting ready to get married, and challenges come up. I wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but how many people would have stayed in that relationship? It's called the sunk cost fallacy. I put in 10 years, I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
stay in it. And I knew if I stayed in that relationship, we would have probably ended up divorced with kids. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I found my voice in that moment, literally by ending something. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, by the way. And then found my voice literally again by putting myself out there, doing long form content. This isn't something we could do for 15 seconds and hide. Like, you're out there talking, right? Long form content. And then I started sharing my music recently with some friends. Like, I don't have anything published right now, but it's liberating. And I think if you find yourself suppressed in any sort of way in your life, find a way of comfortable expression and start doing
Mm.
that thing. And then you can start working up
Bigger
to
things,
uncomfortable
right?
expression. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't make it a crutch of the comfortable expression. So like, for example, like, oh, I like to draw. I'm comfortable with that. I'll show people my drawings. And then once you start building that expression muscle, you can start doing the uncomfortable things, like having those hard conversations, maybe sharing a poem on an open mic night or something like that. So that you build the muscle, and then you do the uncomfortable
There you have
thing.
it. There you have it. Man, how many times do people have this suppression that's self-imposed,
Mm-hmm.
and they never find it? Like, Luke, let me ask you this. You have athletes that they're young, young kids, right? High school. And some of them, if they kept their head down and kept out of trouble and kept focused, would take off. But some do, and a ton don't. And you said, hey, we're only here once, right? You're only here once. So what holds them back to the point where they never realize it? I gotta believe it's nothing but self-imposed, unrealistic fear. They're afraid of something, right?
Yeah, it's it's a great question, and I think you have much more experience in this than me dealing with the kids these days. Like, I couldn't even imagine being in high school at this time. Like, I honestly can't even imagine it. Like, with the constant bombarding of information. I mean, I have challenges with it, and I'm in my 30s, let alone when I'm 16, when I'm still developing my brain and still developing, my like hormonally. So there's so much stimulus. So I don't want to misspeak about that. However, what I will say, it definitely is stress and fear and anxiety. And one of my favorite quotes is Mark Twain. He says, I'm an old man with many problems, most of which haven't happened.
Right?
So we put ourselves in this like total state of fear where we're constantly uh, we're worried about the future. Like like anxiety is just fear of the future. Depression is like I don't know if it's fear of the past, but it has to do with the past. Depression is linked to the past. Anxiety is typically linked to the future. So I think there's an obsession right now, and social media has a big role in it. Constant stimulus, constant validation, seeking validation online. You have all these like chat rooms aren't really a thing anymore, but there are worse things than chat rooms now that people are spending their time on, and we're just constantly being pulled in different directions. We have so much information and stimuli that it's hard to
Mm.
stay grounded. So like for the kids that maybe are indifferent or they're stuck, it's like honestly what I said before. If things aren't adding up, do you need to subtract a whole
Correct a
lot? And I just went through, yeah, and I just went through something crazy and traumatic recently, about a month and a half, 2 months ago. That's why I wasn't that, when we had to reschedule, I was like, it kind of worked out because I was in a pretty interesting place personally. So like right now, I'm cutting people out like that aren't healthy for me, right? Like healthy boundaries, I should say. I'm subtracting and I'm focusing on myself. And with the social media, it's so hard to do that because we need that external
Mm.
validation. So I think I would say validate yourself, focus on yourself, nourish yourself, and then the results will come, whatever you're looking for.
For me, I'm even older by a lot, turning 50 next month. And so, right,
Hey,
I would love for our posts or what we put out there, and you have millions of people saying, "Hey, that's great, it's great stuff." And that's clearly not happened yet. But when we put out what we're doing, I'm just happy to do it. I'm just happy that I'm working with Lucas and
mm,
I come up with three things, or here's a quote and someone else listens to it. Or I had a guy come up and talk to me from the gym. He said, "Hey, because he is a patent attorney, so an engineer and a lawyer, right?" And he goes, and we had a guy on from a financial firm. He goes, "Yeah, I was actually listening, and I took away a number of things," and I'm like, "Cool, cool." So my generation didn't grow up with all that stimulus, so I don't need or want that much validation. It'd be great, but I can't. It's hard for me to relate because if you put out a post and you're used to getting 1,000 likes and now you only got 200, you're gonna feel bad about yourself. So you take it down and run and hide, man. Fuck that. Fuck all that, man. Jesus. But I was talking to
yeah.
Purdue's crew team, the rowing team, this couple days ago on Saturday. They had a big event on Sunday, and we're talking about focus, right? Focusing in the moment.
Mm,
It's a short term thing in the moment, getting ready to compete. And I talk about how you latch onto one why. You control your breathing with some box breathing. Then there's usually some kind of cue. Like when I'm squatting heavy, it would be like knees out, chest up. And then it's just drive. So for them, the cue was catch and send. So you catch the oar in the water correctly, and then you send it to push, propel yourself. Everything else must go away in that moment. All the pain, what you're feeling in your lungs, your back, your legs, doesn't matter. It's catch and send. And you think about your why. And that's, in the moment. The long term, though, all these different thoughts roll in. So they asked, how do you improve your focus? And what I said to them was, well, you can do breathing and things like that, but just do 30 and 6. I go, what's that? Go online right now or on your phone and eliminate 30 things. Start there. Whether it's people that you follow or that follow you, apps on your phone, habits, get rid of 30, right? Narrow your focus. Add 6 things that are going to improve you. Add one person in your life, spiritually. Add one person in your life as a coach. Add some people you follow online where you can constantly learn. And so another little tactic, not a long-term strategy, but a tactic you can do all the time is just cutting out more and more of the fat, more and more of the garbage, just like you said. And you add in one or two things. give up some things. It's easy to give up the things that you hate or things you like a little bit. It's hard to give up things that you like, though. I like potato chips quite a bit. I like my bourbon and cigars too, right? But also don't want to drown in this swim across the Hudson River bullshit next August. So I'm gonna love staying alive a little bit more than liking my chips and my bourbon cigars, right? So, but that's where it gets really hard. Like I like a lot of people, only love a few, and for those that are really looking on greatness, things that you really like sometimes you have to get rid of, and it's easy to get rid of the hard things, but the things that you like a little bit, it makes it challenging. You're like in the middle, man. So you're not even 30 when you're dealing with young kids, and a lot more than I am. So I will deal with a dozen at a time. Luke's going to see 400 in a day. How do you help them stay focused a little bit more and on task?
Well, that's a tough question. Somewhat. Really, it's just kind of continuing to build the culture that we're in and staying consistent. Um, knowing that these kids have somewhere to go, somebody to keep them accountable. For me, that's kind of a big one of my big whys is that I feel like in my position, I'm a big part of consistency for them, consistent accountability, consistent, you know, encouragement or reminding, you know. So when it comes to keeping them focused, it's a lot of it is just being consistent, consistently coaching, if that makes sense. Because it's everybody's when you're dealing with high school kids, especially in our environment, it's the weight room is a at the end of the day, these kids go through a lot, so um, and they have to deal with a lot more than I probably ever had to. So uh,
Sounds like it's a little more keeping more
that's a
guardrails up and a lot more labor intensive, keeping them on task versus just saying
yeah,
one thing to a 50-year-old adult, hey, go do this. All right, got it. Whereas younger folks,
yeah.
right or wrong, takes a little bit more, not necessarily hand holding, but a few more reminders, a few more
Hmm.
reminders, right?
Reminders, yeah, and keeping them on task, and um, it's it's complex these days with the social media, like kind of like what you guys were talking about earlier with social media and being you know trying to fit in the culture that they're a part of. It's you're combating a lot of things. So to me, it's just about being consistent every day. They know what to expect every time they walk in there. So focus is the standard, So that is kind of my way of keeping them focused. Is it's ingrained in them almost.
Awesome.
Sometimes they may not be, they're 100%, maybe 80%, but I need all of that 80. So it's, you know,
Awesome. Jeremy, switching back to you. One of the questions I put out there are topics you want to talk about, and you said if it's not a fuck yes, then it's a fuck no. There's no like in the middle, right? So then the next question is, what are one or two things you're saying fuck yes to, and you're not saying a fuck no to? So what's some of the things that you're like, hey, I'm doing this. It's 2 months left. We're in the fourth quarter of 24. 25 is right around the corner, and I want to do these things. I want to change the world. I'm doing these things. But so, what is the one or two things that you're doing in the next 14 months that we're going to hear about and read about?
Yeah, that's a great question. My FES right now, my fuck yes is just all in on myself right now. So I'm giving up alcohol for the next 100, maybe 150
Well, which is
days.
it?
And well, it's technically before my men's retreat. So I have 105
All right.
days until that. So I'm saying 105
Okay.
days for now, and then we'll see what happens after the retreat.
Perfect.
So that's a challenge for me. I don't think I have a problem, quote unquote, with alcohol. I just like to have 2, 3 beers and just enjoy it. Maybe a cocktail, maybe a glass of wine. I don't know. But but I've noticed that I've been using it as a dissociation like tactic. So instead of embracing the dip, doing the buffalo dip, I would just find excuses to go out, have a couple beers, and then before you know it, like I'm not going to work on myself. I'm not going to meditate and like do breath work and journal when I've had a few beers with me, you know? So right now I'm going all in on my health and like zero dark 30, just locking myself. I move into my new apartment on Wednesday, and I've noticed that I've been the most consistent. I've been the healthiest. I've been the most committed to the game when I've lived by myself. In the past year and a half, I've had roommates, I've had a romantic partnership, and, you know, I've allowed external forces and other people pull me away. And again, that's my responsibility. I allowed it to happen. So I'm not blaming them at all. What I'm saying is right now, I just need to I'm recommitting to myself. And I actually just finished re-listening to Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Awesome, awesome book. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. I recommend the audio book, because he reads it himself. Who doesn't like listening to Matthew
Right?
McConaughey's voice? I mean, come
All
on.
right, all right, all
And
right.
one thing, all right, all right. I'm going to do a little bit of a spoiler here. Okay. Just bear with me. He was going to go to law school, and his dad was super excited about it. And he decided not to, and he wanted to go to film school. And he thought his dad was going to be flipped the F out when he told him this. So he calls his dad up. His dad says 3 magic words that I freaking love. And I was like, it changed. It like really landed with me, because I needed to hear that. And he said, don't half-ass it. Don't half-ass it. When was the last time I truly, truly committed to something? And it's been a long time. You know, I've had businesses, and I've had multiple businesses at the same time. I don't have them anymore. You know, so there's something there to look at. If I stay in one lane and I truly go all in on it, great results come from it. And I have data over the point of my life, over the course of my life, when I have committed to one thing. So committing to myself in the next, 3 months, well, my whole life, but you get my point. But through my health, clean eating, detoxing, weightlifting, I'm the strongest I've ever been, which is great, but we get to trim some fat, literally and figuratively trimming some fat. So my fuck yes right now is myself.
Awesome.
And myself and my business it's not my business, but the business I'm working with currently. So if I had to pick 2, it'd be
There you have
that.
it. It's easy to add 3 and 10 and becomes 30 and then 100, I want to do this. I want to go to church. Great. Then I want to do this with my church. And then I want to make sure I'm doing this with my friends. And then next thing you know, you have 30 friends. Well, hey, it's this person's birthday party. And it's this person's, kid's birthday party. So now you got 30 birthday parties and 30 kids' birthday parties, right? So it keeps adding up and adding up. And God almighty, we have 6 kids and 4 dogs. 4 dogs. What? No, no. And I love these damn dogs, right? Even the little one. But I get it. Yeah, if you want to go far, go alone. Wait, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with someone else. That's the African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. So you can go fast, when you're running lean by yourself. And then at some point, when you want to
Yeah.
go further, you'll need a teammate. And then that's the big trade-off. Can you build a team? So I find if you're out of balance some area really badly, you might be in balance someplace great, but not always. So if you're really out of balance with your faith or your health or your job, I have one guy, he's great at training, but doesn't make enough money to pay for much training, right? I'm like, well, you got to build this machine. So if your body's breaking down, your mind's breaking down, then you don't feel good about yourself. You start beating yourself up. You're gonna be upset, right? You're gonna be depressed because you're looking at yourself, what you were. And that you can't really separate. So what's that Matrix quote? You can't separate the mind from the body and hope to do well there, right? Man, I've lived that life, fat and out of breath and embarrassing and struggling. Oh, never again. So at the end of your 30 days, man, I
Nope.
hope this next iteration of you on that piece sticks, and then you just evolve and
Mm-hmm.
elevate from there. That's the new standard, right? There's no regressing with if you're the job you're in. Are you still going to keep the J curve going then?
Oh yeah, I'm going all. So when I say committed to myself, like there's four elements to health, right? Mental, physical, emotional,
Yep.
spiritual, right? You're only as strong as your
Right.
weakest link. If you're weak in one of those areas, the other three are going to be affected. So I'm going to be focusing on all of that. But when I mentioned consistency, that was when I was living on my own. I was consistently doing interviews. I was consistently posting on Instagram, and at that point, I was gaining 100 followers a day. So like when you click, when I'm on, like it's over. So like I'm looking forward to this time on my own to get into my own personal space in 2 days. Praise the Lord. Right? Like I'm gonna be on my own again and it's gonna be so good. And not to say like my time with other people wasn't valuable. Like it was great, I've had going to church with my roommates, going to the gym with my roommates, cooking with my former partner. Like it was all good. I'm not saying it was bad all the time, but my point is there's no excuses. It's just you, yourself, and the voices, right? So I'm looking forward to this time.
So, what's the process going to be when I'm not going to say you relapse or backslide, because hanging out with your friends and going to church isn't a bad thing. But at some point, some of those things might creep back in. You might have another partner, right? You got to have a
Mm-hmm.
process that's a little different. Otherwise, you'll go a month without putting out a podcast. You'll go, I'm not, or 6 weeks without doing something. How do you take that next elevation and make sure that this is an extreme example that those old demons, like having a drink is not necessarily a demon, right? But you don't backslide to the point where you're like, well, shoot, I derailed and I'm not happy with myself anymore. A stop
Mm-hmm.
loss in the financial world. We have someone,
Mm-hmm.
when I go on, I know I'll eat too much on Thanksgiving. I know it, right? But you gotta have a process to pull yourself back out the next day, right? Otherwise, that Thursday rolls into Friday, rolls into the weekend. Next thing you know, it's Monday. You have 4 days of 3,000 calorie days, right? Fuck, that's bad. There's got to be some type of process when you slip up because you're not going to be perfect. Have you worked that out yet? Because it's going to come at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, what have done in the past that has worked, and first of all, accountability is
Yes.
huge. So I'm in the process of creating a contract with myself and a buddy of mine to ensure that this doesn't happen. And there's a separate speech I'm also working on currently right now. It's a working title, but it's called Sell Yourself for Change. And not literal change, but change.
Right.
Right. So we're playing with the title a little bit, but you got to have a goal. We got to understand too how the brain operates. The brain's wired to go the path of least resistance, avoid pain, and go towards pleasure. So we have to really understand that. I have finally understood that. Okay. And then you need to have a clear goal in mind. Where are you looking to go? And it has to be a strong enough why behind that goal. And then the final thing is you have to understand the cost of not achieving that goal. There needs to be something attached to it that's painful. So, for example, my friend, my friend, uh, he, I don't know where your listeners are politically. I don't really care, but I'm just going to share this story because it's hilarious. So my friend is said if he doesn't reach his goal, if he doesn't reach his physical goal, he has to read Kamala Harris's book and go on Instagram and say everything he's
Mm,
loved about
strong.
it. that is more painful for him than a lot of things. Okay. So you have to have an at stake. You have to have an at stake. So I'll tell you an example. I'm not going to go into detail about the commitment I made, but I said I set out a goal, and I said if I did not complete this 10-day goal, I'm not allowed to drink on vacation. I didn't even think twice about it. Didn't even think twice about it. Boom, crushed that goal. So and you have to send it. There needs to be some accountability with somebody. So I've already got that process down. Understand your brain. We're all the same in the sense of we're wired to seek the path of least resistance. So having some intentional, like self-deprivation, having intentional challenges, like ice baths is a perfect example. Like doing that, you're wiring your brain to do a hard thing. Okay. Fasting, you're wiring your brain to do a hard thing. You need to eat, right? So you need to understand the brain. Number 2, you got to have your goal. And number 3, you need some sort of accountability or an at stake if you aren't unable to succeed. So that's a classic one. I'm going to donate to the opposition. Most people wouldn't want to do that. Make it a high number too, and go public about it, right? So to answer your question, like what if there's a slip up? What if there is some sort of relapse or what have you? I'm not saying I'm never going to drink again. I'm not saying that. Right now, I've been blessed with revelations and conviction the past few days. So you're catching me at a really good time. There's no other way. I have concerts, I have a wedding, I have Christmas, I have Thanksgiving, not drinking. I'm still going to have a good time. I could talk to a freaking wall, right? I'm so set on being in peak physical condition that I'm not even going to think twice about it.
That makes it easy then.
That's the set.
Tony talks about it. Tony talks about it all the time. When you actually decide, game over. Because all the other future choices are gone. Am I going out Friday night? No, because I chose this. Am I not going to watch film?
Mm-hmm.
No, because I chose to be MVP. I chose to be an All-American. I chose to have a winning team this year.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Oh, does it mean I'm not doing my creatine? No, it means I'm doing all those things. The choices are gone. You're down to like 3. And those are just going to be like semantics. Am I eating at noon or at 12:30? It's not. Am I not getting enough protein? Once you decide, all the other choices out the window. As for accountability,
yep.
If there's anything I can do, I can hold people accountable. I'll get with them and I'll ask them the horrible questions, and then I'll have the answers. I've been blessed with 3 years of interviewing and interrogation training, working with white collar crime and organized crime. So I'm gonna ask all these horrible questions and find out what's really important to you, and I'm gonna find the 10 things that are important to you, and then prioritize them. And we're gonna remind ourselves of those things and rewire our identity so that there is a strong conviction and decision, and then it's done. It's over. We're doing it. What's the punishment look like? I don't know. 5-mile farmer's carry. Fuck. Right. Right.
Fat dude.
Push my car downtown and back. No. Right. And it's so easy at that point because you're like, well, yeah, you have to put enough weight behind it. The one thing I would challenge you with is you have to have a goal. Yes, you have to have some big or directional goals. Number 1 podcast, maybe it's a nice one. Most impactful podcast, different, right? Or how about I want to work on my podcast with a recording, and in addition to that, 30 minutes a day, extra 30 minutes a day to refine it and improve it, or an hour a day. When I have that long-term directional goal, all I really care about is what are my process goals, because that's what gets me through day to day, and I can get a win today, which then makes me feel good. It gives me that feedback loop. It makes me happy. Dopamine release, serotonin, all the cortisol drops. Like you're happy about some things because you got some wins. So now your habit's sustainable. Do it again tomorrow. Do it again tomorrow. Do it again tomorrow. Right? Fuck, I got 7 wins in a row this week. What'd you get? None. All right. Fuck you. I win. Right? So that keeps me a little happier. Because if you got a 15-month goal, it's easy to say, well, I got time. I got time. I got time. I got time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a lie. It's such a lie, right? What was the next question I had for you?
I like the idea of having like little wins. And that's another thing that my buddy and I are working on as well. We just actually re-listened to Atomic Habits. Amazing book. If you guys haven't checked it out, definitely check that out.
That's
so
funny.
Basically, what I worked out for myself is every night I get invited and I go out and I don't partake in drinking, or if I get invited and say no, I'm gonna put $50 into an account so I can buy myself
Nice.
something nice. So like that's like a little reward I'm gonna have for myself. So yeah, I like that.
Our episode 8, we ran through the entire book, every chapter, and how we
Oh,
apply it to
nice.
athletes. I've probably given away 30, 40, 50 copies of that book. It it's probably one of my favorites. Bible's number one.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
I like to say my book's my favorite now, but man, it's kind of hard to
Yeah.
beat James Clear's Atomic Habits. Um, with this new, not necessarily new year, new you, because it's before the new year, but you're trying to be healthier. What are some things that aren't physical necessarily you're working on? Things that you're reading, people you're listening to, you know, uh, podcasts you listen to. What are some tips and tricks there?
Yeah, that's a really good
Please
question.
say Athlete Builder Podcast. Be a
So I'm
homer,
at
right? Plug,
plug,
right?
plug. To be honest, I'm not a big consumer of podcasts. I'm a producer of podcasts. I'm gonna be very
Sure.
honest. However, so my friend Riley and we have a little book club together. So where we meet every Friday, but every 2 weeks we finish a new book. And what I love about James Clear and what he talks about is, and I used to talk about this all the time, especially dealing with Tony and Dean, is like the healing and learning loop. Like you go to the seminar, you go to the next
Mm-hmm.
seminar, you go to the next seminar, you read the next book, you do the next course, and then you don't do
Right.
shit,
Waste.
right? And then James Clear, he has a definition for that, or not definition, but he has words for that. It's motion versus action. So motion is you read the book, actions, you read the book and you implement it. So you do
Right.
the thing, right? So for me, we meet every week. We read a book and then we pick 3 things needle movers that we could utilize from that book, and then we integrate and we hold each other accountable. So that's our little process that we have cooked up together. Now, your question was, what am I doing
That's one.
internally? So right now I told you about this book on my show. It's my favorite book. It's The Greatest Salesman in the World. It's by Og Mandino. It's just a quick synopsis about it. It's not about sales. It's a life principle book, and um, it's 10 scrolls. I always say it's kind of like as if The Alchemist and The Four Agreements had a baby. Like as most people who have read those understand what I mean. But it's a life principle book. In the first chapter, the first scroll is I will form good habits and make myself a slave to
Mm.
them. So just finished Atomic Habits. Now I'm instilling this into my brain. And there's like a 3 to 5 page passage for each scroll, and you have to read it 3 times a day. In the morning we wake up, after lunch, and one time before bed. So you're drilling these principles
Yep.
into your brain. So there's that. Spiritually, I have not been good about going to church. I'm not going to lie, but going to church, my commitment's 3 times per month if I don't go every single day, every single Sunday, and praying every day. And having a bedtime. Now haven't established that yet, but that's something I'm intending to do. Like I no like having a non-negotiable, like door is shut behind me at X time. Let's just say it's 11:30, right? And just having that's just going to allow me to get into a routine, because your night sets you up for the morning. Everyone obsesses over the morning routine, but what about the nighttime routine? My former partner, she's in trauma and all that stuff. We she a practitioner for trauma release and stuff like that. And she put it so brilliantly before. And that's like, if we are highly stimulated, we're watching the news or we're scrolling our phone or, whatever, right before, and then we should close and then we go right to bed. It's like we're going in a state of trauma. We have to treat ourselves like an infant. An infant's rocked to bed, right? So how do we rock ourselves to bed? It could be a 10-minute process, but how do we consciously shut down our bodies to prepare ourselves for bed? And then for me, that's going to be through reading, maybe like just 10 quick breaths. And by quick, I mean like time wise, I could do 10 breaths and it could be 5 in, 5 out. and then shutting off and like leaving the phone away. Right. So internally, just being the man that like stepping into that vision now.
Right, right. That's exactly what we do with our athletes. If you're changing your bedtime, you're giving yourself self-imposed jet lag. You talk about
Right. He said
when
that
you
on our
get
show.
up,
Yeah.
you want to worry about getting up early, but it's all about going to bed late. What's your top 10 on how
Yeah.
to sleep better? That's super easy. And it's like you said about the baby. When I had three little kids, there's a little fan in each room, a little white noise. Well, I'm turning 50. I got a fan in my room. A little white noise helps me sleep. Right? It's all those
Yeah.
things,
Yeah.
and they all matter. Rewiring your brain. And so last night, like late 9:30, I checked my phone like an idiot, and that book I collaborated on, they're talking about there's a book signing and a gala, and it's Times Square, it's New York City, and I was like, oh fuck, I don't like going to New York, but it's a cool thing. And then I thought, well, it's that weekend. Zach Evanesh, who Lucas and I had on, he's having an underground strength con that same weekend. I'm like, well, if I put them both together, now it's really worth the money to go there for a couple of days. Well, this is 9:30, 9:40. I'm in bed 10, right? I'm supposed to be shutting down. I had my
Yeah.
book out. I'm reading. I'm upstairs. The phone's gone, plugged in, and I checked it before I sat down. And I thought, so now my brain's thinking, shit, how much is that going to cost me? $1,100 probably with all the tickets. Do I want to do that? I got to rearrange this other thing. I'm going to miss part of this. So all these questions, the brain's running full tilt going into Sunday
Right.
night, and I slept like shit last night. I woke up a dozen times. The same thoughts were in my head. My brain was working the whole night through, not resting. I woke up all fucked up today, right? And so
Mm.
I knew I was going to schedule some time right around noon to go work through that whole challenging process, make my decision and go. But I didn't. I started working on it early and messed things up. So I totally empathize with what you said about having that evening routine. It is critical if you want to win. If you want to win.
Hmm.
You mentioned a whole,
Rock yourself to sleep
damn
at night,
right.
guys.
So when you're training, like you said, you're hitting the gym. What do you like to listen to?
Oh yeah, I saw that on the prep call on the prep notes. I'm all over the
All right.
place, man. It would be between three things. It's hip hop, worship music, and then maybe some motivational
Yeah, I do that.
speeches. That, and so that's that. That's where I'm at. I mean, I'm in the gym an hour a day, so if I can drill some inspiration in my head, I'll do that. So hip hop, worship, or motivation. That's where
How
I'm
about a
at.
place you want to visit you haven't been to yet?
Whew, that's a good question. Italy, Italy, the
All
old
right.
country. Yeah, got to get out there.
Favorite sports movie? Okay.
Rocky.
The first one or Rocky Four, Ivan Drago or what?
No, like my dog's name
Yeah.
was Rocky. I love Rocky. I growing up, I didn't really watch the first one
Ooh,
that much, but now I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. We were always like a 2, 3, 4
right.
family, and now it's the first one, hundred
You only
percent.
won Best Picture for that one, right?
Yeah. Did you know? I was just gonna say that it won Best Picture. Most people don't know that. That's
Be-
crazy. Do you know the
be-
story behind that?
Best
Have you looked into
screenplay
that?
down to his last $300. Sold his dog because he needed money for food. Got because everyone said he couldn't play the lead, so he kept taking it different places. Finally, someone gave him the lead, gave him a little bit of money, went back and bought his dog back, who was actually in it.
For like 30
Yeah,
grand or
right.
something.
Yeah, he was all in on
Yeah.
himself, and he was down to nothing, nothing, nothing. And
Yeah. His
yeah,
girlfriend
I know
left
that
him.
part. Dang.
Yeah, girlfriend left him. Like that's a freaking
Like
story, dude.
the fight, the main fight, shot the whole thing in one day. They started at the end and then finished at the beginning. That shooting a fight it takes days, weeks, setting everything up. They shot the budget
Yeah.
was so small. Shot the whole thing in a month, under 30 days. Ah,
Yep.
yeah. Don't get me started on
Yep.
Mr. Rocky.
Other movies though, I'm a big Remember the Titans guy. Varsity
Oh,
Blues. That was like the coming of age football
right.
movie for me.
So, what's your favorite football to watch?
Oh God, I'm a Bears guy. Sadly, it's just every just when I think I'm out, they pull me back in, and then when they pull me back in, they let me down.
Could be worse.
Yeah,
I'm from Cleveland.
I've seen. Okay, okay. So I've seen 14 Bears games
Okay,
live. Guess how many times I've seen them
7.
win?
0.
No, no. 0
Zero.
for 14.
0 for
Well,
14, dude.
whenever they
0
play
for
Cleveland
14.
again, make sure you go.
Go to that game. All right, deal. I told myself I would never go back to a game until they had a winning season, and then that was the year that we the double doink with
Mm.
Trubisky, and then yeah, it's just it's tough. It's tough being a Bears fan. We just cling to something that happened 40 years ago.
You
Anyway,
said your
new
favorite book's
topic.
The Greatest Salesman. How about like hero or villain? And it could be real or nonfiction.
Hero. Hmm. It's interesting you asked me about heroes because I have an interesting relationship with the hero word. I call it the hero complex, where we have heroes, we idolize people, where we're
Mm.
devaluing ourselves. So I like to believe that we're all on the same plane. So just for the sake of the question, like a hero of mine, hmm, gosh, you know, it's such a tough question. It's such a tough question. I would say anybody that's an underdog that over against all odds, someone like a Tony Robbins,
Rocky,
someone like that, even like I was going to
right?
say Rocky, like that's Rocky for sure. Like just the whole story is amazing. And by the way, for if you want a good laugh, go after this, go check out Eddie Murphy on YouTube. It's Eddie Murphy. It's the bit when Italians, after they just watch Rocky, it's freaking
I'll do that.
hilarious. So check that out.
How about a
But
favorite villain?
Rocky, you know, I I would say the Joker. I would say just it's just a classic villain, and it's the guy, the agent of chaos, just does whatever he wants, no fear of repercussions, and someone I once did an exercise, and it was you create your own villain, and that's just a different version of you. It's like your alter ego, and then compete with that person because any hero has to overcome something. So if you create your own villain, which is your alter ego that does whatever they want, accomplishes everything they want, goes all in on whatever they need to do, they don't let anyone prevent them from doing what they need to do, and then I compete with that person. If that guy, my guy would actually do the extra reps in the gym, so I'm going to do them. That guy would stay late and make extra calls. I'm going to make extra calls. Like yourself, I'm going to end on a win no matter what. My villain, he would do 100 push-ups right before bed. I'm going to do 100 push-ups before bed. So we create this like mind game where we're competing against this alter ego, which is just ourselves. So in a roundabout way of saying the hero is me, the villain's me, right? So have a little fun with it.
Nothing wrong with someone coming on my show and giving me the answer. I'm the hero in my story, and I'm trying to get him to win, right? Nothing wrong with saying that. It's a
Mm-hmm.
little ballsy and it puts you out,
Yep.
and it's arrogant, right? So some people would say, but I'm the hero. The hero's not always getting this. He's not always winning, but I'm the hero in my story, and I'm trying to get him to win, right? I'm trying to get him to where we need to be. You got a favorite quote for us?
Yep. Yeah. The hmm. I'm a big okay, I'll say the narrow and wide gates from the Sermon on the Mount. It's my favorite Bible passage. It's enter the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and
Mm.
few find it. So find that narrow gate in your life. Keep going. Just because everyone else is doing something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Find that narrow gate for yourself.
Love it, love it. Where can we find you in the J curve?
Yeah, my handle is my full name, Jeremy Trinchere, Jeremy Trinchere. The J Curve is available on all audio platforms. We're not on video yet. I have like 4 episodes up on video, but just haven't gotten around to being, going into post on video. So Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Buzzsprout, what you name it, the J
Awesome.
Curve.
And then the J Curve's also on social media.
Yeah, it's the J Curve podcast with underscores. I'm not as active on that one, to be honest, but you can follow the J Curve podcast if you like. There's underscores in between
Gotcha.
each word.
Hey, Jeremy, great time today. I liked the discussion. I liked how it was broad, but brought it back into things that are applicable, whether you're working on yourself or you're working on other athletes, and the lessons transcend all those different industries. So, a lot of good stuff. Learned a lot today, man. Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Lucas. Nice to meet you, my friend. And yeah, looking forward to meeting one day in person. I'm a Midwest boy.
Awesome.
Come on now.
For those that follow along still, you have questions, send it to us, info@athlete-builder.com. And humbly, if you can check out the 2 books that I launched, the whole goal is to make an impact. So, Athlete Builder, the blueprint for building champion athletes, that's out there, Barnes& and Noble, Amazon, and then Triumphs of Transformation. That's the one I collaborated with the other 30 authors on. Essentially, every chapter was a J curve. Every different author in a different industry did a bunch of things incorrectly and had a bunch of mess ups, and we're able to turn it around a little bit. So that's the whole premise of that book. So help us out and support the show and support that, and hopefully make an impact. So until next time, everybody, we'll see you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.